Hi guys, hello, welcome to today's video. As you can see behind me, we have some very empty shelves. I want to start redecorating my bookshelves for like the season, but that is not what we're going to be doing in today's video. That is going to be the next one coming up. But because we have kind of like dismantled the bookshelves and I've been kind of like going through my like 400, I think-ish plus book collection, I've been going through those the past few days and kind of like picking out all of like the spooky season type of books. So I thought maybe it'd be fun to kind of like go through some of them and kind of like talk about the ones that I have read that I would recommend for the fall season and ones that I have not read yet that I am hoping to read this fall season. So without further ado, here are all of the books that I'm going to be recommending, and we are going to go through the ones that I have already read first. So these are my personal fall recommendations from the books that I own. And the first couple that I have are actually just kind of more authors in general that I highly recommend for fall. We have Grady Hendrix and Riley Sager. These are a couple of the books that I've read from them that I liked a lot. This one in particular is How to Sell a Haunted House, and I think this is the most recent one that I read. And I think it's also one of my favorites. Like I really like this one. It does, from the title, sound like it's actually going to be about a haunted house. It's more so about haunted dolls, which is personally something that I have always been afraid of. I think it started from watching Chucky as like a small child. I have always been terrified of just like my toys waking up in general. Like Toy Story, not something I would ever want to actually happen to me. Loved those movies as a kid, but would be a nightmare if it actually happened. So anyway, this one was personally kind of spooky to me. That being said though, I do want to kind of just like put this out there just for kind of like a gauge of spookiness. I don't really get freaked out by books. Movies, totally different story. Like there's definitely been some books, one of them I actually will be talking about in a little bit, where if I was to watch a movie of it, I would not be interested at all, but I loved the book. So I'm probably not the best to gauge whether something is scary or not, or too gory. Like those things don't bother me if I can't see them, if that makes any sense. Moving on, again, we have Riley Sager as my other just kind of like general person that I think of for like thrillers and spooky season type of books. Again, I do think I've read a good chunk of their books as well, and I've liked the majority of them. I definitely think I like Grady Hendrix a little bit more, specifically because I feel like Riley Sager, in like half of their books, it's just kind of like a creepy thriller, and then the other half, this one actually being one of them, where the ending is just bizarre. And when it comes to like murder mysteries and thrillers and stuff like that, like I personally love to like try to figure out who it is, and with some of his books there's just like absolutely no way. So anyway, those are kind of like two general authors that I would definitely recommend. Okay, I was just looking through some of these and I definitely did not do a very good job at like organizing them. I organized them by like ones I've read and ones I haven't, but like aside from that, I didn't really like put them in any particular order, so I do apologize if this is kind of like all over the place. But the next couple ones that I have are just kind of more like adventure-y type of books that I just think would in general be fun to read. First one being Long Live Evil. I do feel like the cover definitely screams kind of spooky season specifically, and it is about a girl that gets dropped into her favorite like romance series, and she finds out that she's the villain in the story. So it does have kind of like a spooky season type of theme. I love it. This is one of my most favorite books ever, and I just kind of want everyone to read it. So there's that one. And then another little fun like adventure series that I've been working my way through is the Time That I Got Drunk and series. I don't know what it's actually called, but this one is actually the second book. This is That Time I Got Drunk and Yeeted a Love Potion at a Werewolf. I just finished this one last night. These are so cute and fun. Like the FMC in this one is Brie, and she is a cheesemaker. And then in the first book, our main character was Cinnamon, and she's a spice farmer. And again, there is kind of like werewolves and demons and things like that, and dragon shifters or whatever. They are a little spicy. It's a very weird combo of like cozy adventure with spice. Next up we have Phantasma by Kaylee Smith, which I feel like I should actually be saying the authors of all of these books. So Long Live Evil, the author is Sarah Reese Brennan, and then the author of That Time I Got Drunk series is Kimberly Lemming. And back to Phantasma by Kaylee Smith. This book and the second book have also been out. Enchantra is the second one. These definitely give me fall vibes. I mean, even the cover of this one looks very kind of like fall-esque. These ones are fantasy romances with a little bit of like a dark kind of twist, or kind of like gothic kind of vibe-ish. They both have really unique kind of competitions involved in them, and specifically the second one, honestly, I don't own the second one, but that one specifically, I really loved the characters. Like I fell in love with the family that she's in competition with, and I'm really hoping that we get more from that cast of characters. And if you're looking for like a fantasy romance mingled in with all of your horror and thriller and spooky season books, I feel like these would be good ones. And speaking of adventure type stories, I have a few more that I think are a lot of fun. I read both of these ones actually like my first fall of having this channel, and I really enjoyed both of them. This first one is The Night Hunt by Alexandra Christo. And I'm gonna be honest, this was not like my most favorite book in the world, but I did really enjoy it, and I never really see anyone talk about it, and I do feel like it's worth mentioning. It definitely has kind of like a spooky season type of atmosphere to it, and it is a standalone, which is, I feel like, very unique for fantasy books. At least with the books that I've read, I feel like every fantasy that I read is part of a series. So this was actually a nice little like kind of like reprieve from that. Your main character in this is a monster who feeds on fear, and she runs into Silas, who is a herald, and he's been kind of like tasked with punishing her because she did something that she wasn't supposed to a human, and they end up kind of like striking up a deal. I don't remember why for either side of the story, but I do remember this being fun and cute, so definitely recommend that one. And then the other one I really enjoyed. It took a little bit for me to get into. It was a little slow of a start, but this is God Killer by Hannah Kaner. I've talked about this series in general a couple of different times because I do own all 3 of the books that are included in this so far. I don't know how many there's going to be. This one in general has a very kind of like found family type of vibe where these random collection of people kind of like come together for one mission. And when I had first finished reading this book, I actually did describe it as being kind of like a dark, cozy fantasy. I don't know if that exists, but it definitely does have a cozy fantasy vibe because of that found family element. But it also is pretty dark. This book opens up with one of our main characters. She becomes a god killer as an adult because as a child, a god burned her entire family alive. So it's definitely got some dark elements to it, but the story overall is really fun, and you do get multiple perspectives. It's basically about a knight, a little girl, a god, and a god killer. I think those are the characters, if I remember correctly. I don't think I'll move on to the next book in October because I've got too many like actual thriller spooky season books to do, but in November I think that would be perfect. Moving on, we have a couple more just kind of like random books that I didn't really know how to categorize. This one in particular is a YA fantasy. This one actually came out kind of recently, within the last like year and a half I think, and I've never really seen anyone talk about it. And it doesn't necessarily like scream spooky season or fall, but a big chunk of this one does take part in the woods, which I feel like just automatically feels very kind of like fall to me. And this one, in my opinion, has a really unique kind of like magic system and just story in general. Like I've never really read anything like this until I read this, you know what I mean? Again, it is a fantasy, and it's basically about a group of students that accidentally get abandoned in the woods, and they have to like use their magic and their like knowledge to get out. And this actually does have a little bit of a darker element to it than I was expecting going into it, so I don't know. I think this is actually pretty like fall, maybe even spooky season vibes. Next up, we have another book that I actually read either the beginning of this month or last month. I don't remember, but I read it recently, very recently, and this one also actually takes place in the woods. This one, the best way that I can describe it is kind of like an adult version of Hatchet. Hatchet was one of my favorite books as a kid, and that one is essentially about a child whose plane crashes in the Canadian wilderness and he has to survive until he gets saved. This one is very similar, but it's kind of different in the sense of this one is about a group of 4 adults that are a part of a reality TV show, and they get abandoned in the woods during the show and they have to survive. So kind of a similar premise, but like a little bit of an adult version. And this one definitely gets dark for sure. The next little grouping of books that I have are also just very random. They have absolutely nothing to do with each other, but they're books that I have read that I enjoyed, that I do feel like give fall vibes. The first one being The 7.5 Deaths of Evelyn Hardcastle, and this one is by Stuart Turton. And this one is essentially a murder mystery where everyone is kind of like stuck at this one location and they have to figure out which one of them did it. But this one has a really cool twist in the sense of our detective character wakes up every morning in the mind/body of a different guest from that day. So he ends up going through the same day over and over and over again, but in the minds of like a different character. Is that not the coolest concept ever? That being said, kind of like circling back to what I said earlier about trying to guess like who did it and that kind of thing, like I love doing that. But with this one, because he kept jumping into the lives of other people, there was just way too much going on for me to keep track of. So I think like halfway through the book, I was just like, you know what? I'm just gonna be along for the ride. And also too, the only thing I didn't love about this book was the ending. It ended in a very bizarre out-of-pocket way. And I kind of hate when books do that, just purely for the fact that, again, there's just no way you're gonna guess, because there was another overarching kind of like thing that happened at the end that there was just no previous mention of, and there was like no way possible that you would ever guess. That's the only thing I would say is the downside to this, but I still highly recommend it. I think it was so good and so interesting and such a cool concept. So loved that. Next up we have the Belladonna series by Adeline Grace. And this is probably one of the more popular books that I've mentioned. I really tried to like pick books that I've already read that like people don't mention all the time. And this is kind of like the only exception to that, I guess. Like I feel like a lot of people talk about this series, but I do feel like it does give very kind of like fall winter vibes. It's kind of perfect for the season. It has an overall kind of gothic-ish kind of atmosphere as well, but also too it does have elements of romance to it, which I feel like could be good to kind of like switch things up a little bit. I know for me personally, I always tend to start off October specifically with like a ton of thrillers and horror books, and like halfway through the month I'm just like, I never want to see a thriller or a horror book again. So if you want to kind of like switch things up a little bit, I feel like that'd be a good one. And speaking of, I feel like this would also be another kind of good thing to still get a creepy vibe from, but like also have a little bit of like spicy romance thrown in as well. This is the Sparrow Falls series by Catherine Cowles. This book in particular is the 5th one, so I wouldn't recommend just like starting off randomly in the middle of the series, but this is the only one that I own physically, so this is just kind of a little placeholder for the series. But these are basically spicy small town romances with a thriller involved, which I think is kind of funny because you would literally never expect it from the way that the covers from this series look. They're all very girly looking and just very cutesy, but they've definitely got dark vibes hiding behind this cover. Next up, I have a few different like little couplings of books that kind of like go together. And the first one are 2 books by Brom. I read Slewfoot by Brom last year and I really enjoyed it. This is like the quintessential like October read. This one takes place in colonial New England, and there is definitely a theme of like religion and witches and, you know, the battle between the two. But there's also some like very creepy kind of like mythical creatures involved. Here's a couple of illustrations of those. Because Brom is not just a writer, they're also an illustrator as well. So within each book, you actually get illustrations in the middle of the book of like the characters, which I absolutely love because you get a visual of these like creepy characters, which is cool. But all that being said, this book did make me extremely angry. Like I feel like the majority of my experience with this book was me just being pissed. Just like so angry for our FNC because she's just wronged the entire time. Like it's just thing after thing after thing. That being said, the other book that I have is The Child Thief by Brom, and I have not read this one yet, but this is on my October TBR. This one is essentially a dark kind of reimagining of Peter Pan, and I absolutely cannot wait. There's a little quote at the top that says, "A wonderfully nasty Peter Pan reboot that stands on its own as a dark, twisted adventure." I can't wait. Cannot wait. Also too, if you couldn't tell from the last 2 books, these little couplings that I have are kind of like a mix of a book that I've read and a book that I have not read that kind of have something similar to do with each other. And the next little grouping that we have are actually book club books. So I do have a book club that I host on Fable. It's completely free. It's called The Midnight Readers. I leave a link for it in every video, so go ahead and check out the description if you want to join. In my last video that I mentioned it, I said that we were almost at 300, and the last time I checked, I think we are actually at 300, which is crazy. 309 members right now. But anyway, these couple of books that I have to do with the book club. So we have last month's read, and this is Terror at the Gates by Scarlett St. Clair. This one, I mean, as you can see from the cover, has definitely got a creepy kind of spooky type of vibe. And this one actually, funny enough, also has to do with religion, which is definitely not my favorite thing to read about because it does make me so angry. There's always like injustices that happen because of the religious aspect, and it just infuriates me. And that is definitely something I was nervous about going into this one. But Scarlett St. Clair is one of my favorite writers, so I was willing to kind of like give it a shot. And I'm gonna be totally honest, I think this was one of my least favorite books from her so far, but I did still enjoy it. And again, I do feel like it fits well with spooky season. So there's that one. And then the other book that I have is Anathema by Carrie Lake. And this one is officially our October book club book read. So if you've been thinking about joining the book club and this is a book that you've been wanting to read, now would definitely be a good time to join. I'm really excited about this one. I've had this one for quite some time. The cover of this is what initially kind of like drew me to it, and I'm excited to finally get to it. And then we have 2 books by the same author, and this is our last little coupling that I have. But these are a couple of horror books by Nick Cutter, and these are kind of a couple of the only, oh god, that scared the living daylights out of me. These are 2 of, I think, a handful of horror books in general that I have for this list. Horror is definitely not a genre that I read a ton of. I literally think I only read like a couple in October, and that's basically it. This one is the one that I have already read. This is The Troop by Nick Cutter. This one is essentially about a troop leader and a group of boys that get trapped on this island, and really creepy, gross things start happening. I will warn you, this is a very gory book. Personally, it didn't really bother me. There was a couple things that like set me on edge a little bit, but it had nothing to do with the gore. Like the main thing that I heard in reviews before I got this book was about how gory it was, and then from you guys actually, after I talked about this, a few of you had mentioned that this was like too gory. So again, I'm definitely not a good radar for how gory or scary something is. All of that being said, I absolutely loved the writing of this book. I feel like this writer has like a really unique way of describing things, which honestly is probably what makes it like extra gory, because they're expressing it really well. That being said, I also have The Deep by Nick Cutter, which I have not read yet, and I'm hoping to read this year, because I think I read The Troop 2 Halloweens ago. So this one is definitely overdue for a read. And honestly, I don't really know what this one's about, and I kind of want to keep it that way. So I'm just kind of leaving it in general as like Nick Cutter as my recommendation for a horror book. And speaking of horror, I think the only two other horror books that I have are these two, and I've had them for a long time. I think this is like the third fall that I've owned these, so I really need to read them. That just kind of goes to show how like infrequently I read horror books. But this one we have Clown in a Cornfield by Adam Cesar, something like that. And this one I'm guessing is about a clown in a cornfield, which clowns specifically are something that have always really creeped me out. Clowns and people in like character costumes, I don't like. Like I don't like that I can't see the actual person. Also, actually, speaking of that, I worked at McDonald's, was my very first job, and Ronald came to my store one time, and I remember being at the register and he was like standing behind me, and I kind of like looked up at him, and the wrinkles in his face were like distorting the face paint and stuff like that, and I remember it just being so creepy. Like I've been working around this dude all day and I have no idea what he looks like. Like after he washes his face and walks around the store, like I would never know it was him. I don't like that. And the other book that I have is The Cotton Candy Massacre, and as you can see, this one also has a clown on it. So I'm gonna be scaring myself this month. Next up, I have a little stack of YA specific books that I think would be good. Hopefully, again, I haven't read any of these ones, so, which by the way, we've gotten into the books that I have not read yet. I don't know if I already said that. After the little couplings, all of them since then have been ones that I have not read. So I don't know if these ones are good, but they kind of give me, from like the descriptions and things like that, they give me fall vibes. The first one is Poisoned by Jennifer Donnelly, and this one is basically like a Snow White retelling, I think. Our FMC in this book is named Sophie, and they describe her as being very kind of like Snow White-esque with like red lips, dark hair, yada yada. And it talks about how she like rode into the forest for whatever reason, and when she's like stopping to take a rest, a huntsman pulls out a knife and rips out her heart. So it seems like a very dark version of Snow White, and I'm intrigued. And then we have The Ravens by Cass Morgan and Danielle Page, and I've mentioned this one a couple of different times. This one is essentially about a sorority of witches, so definitely screams spooky season to me. I don't know if it's actually going to be spooky, but it seems like it could be like a fun kind of more lighthearted read, again, amongst all of the horror and the scary things. And then we have two books that have kind of similar premises. So we have Darkroom Etiquette, which is about a teenage boy that gets kidnapped and kept in someone's basement. And then we have The Merciless by Danielle Vega. And this is one that I picked up last year, I think during the fall, and I just never got around to reading it. But this one also, I was kind of like looking over the synopsis before I like started filming this, and it seems to have a very similar premise, like I said, to Darkroom Etiquette. So this one says, Brooklyn Stevens sits in a pool of her own blood, tied up and gagged. No one outside of these dank basement walls knows she's here. No one can hear her scream. So we have kind of like two books specifically about people being trapped in basements. Did not do that intentionally. I actually got this one during a TBR jar video where I had to go to the bookstore and pick out a pink book. So this was totally by accident. This one, I knew exactly what I was getting going into it, but it's kind of funny that I ended up getting two books about people being trapped in basements. The next little grouping of books that we have are kind of more contemporary fiction-y, thrillery type of books. I don't really know how to explain it, but they're kind of just more real life, if you will. The first one is Butter by Asako Yuzuki. I feel like I probably butchered that. I am so sorry. But this one is about a gourmet cook who like entices men with her cooking and then murders them or something like that. Like, this sounds dark. The cult Japanese bestseller about a female gourmet cook and serial killer and the journalist's intent on cracking her case. Inspired by a true story. story. The cover is what like really initially attracted me, but then I saw that it was inspired by a true story and I was like, I need to read that. Next up we have Good Rich People by Eliza Jane Brazier. And this one is one that I saw a couple of years ago that just like really intrigued me. The wealthy couple invites self-made success stories to live in their guest house and then conspires to ruin their lives. I'm gonna be honest, when I first got this, I thought it was more so like rich people unalived people. So I thought it was gonna be more like typical thriller, but I think this is more kind of like psychological thriller, which I don't know if I love, but either way, I feel like it would be a good potential for fall. And then we have another kind of like psychological thriller. This one has one of my favorite types of concepts when it comes to like movies and stuff, where basically you have one character that is trying to take over someone else's life. Kind of going over the synopsis, it's basically about a ghostwriter who comes to stay with a celebrity chef. And yeah, the ghostwriter starts kind of like slowly doing things similar and wearing things similar and yada, yada, yada. I love that kind of plot point because it does sound just like creepy. It's not outwardly scary, but it's just creepy, and I'm excited to give this one a read. And then we have these couple of books. This one is The Book of Lost Things by John Connolly. And this one is essentially about a boy, a 12-year-old boy who's mourning the death of his mother and uses books to escape, but then the books start becoming real and things get dark. This sounds very fantasy-esque, but I did find it in the thriller section, and that is definitely intriguing me. And then we have Plain Bad Heroines. This one definitely gives me kind of like dark academia vibes, so I feel like this could work for like October or November. This one takes place in 1902 at a like boarding school for girls. To show their devotion to Mary, the girls establish their own private club and call it the Plain Bad Heroines Society. They meet in secret in a nearby apple orchard, the setting of their wildest happiness and ultimately of their deaths. This is where their bodies are later discovered with a copy of Mary's book splayed beside them. This one definitely sounds really interesting. The only reason I haven't read it yet is because this is a very chunky book. And when it comes to October, again, that's kind of when I read all of like my thrillers, my horrors. I do thrillers every once in a while, like one every month or two. But the most of my thriller and horror and scary, creepy things are reserved for October. So I have a very limited amount of time to read, and a big old chunky book like this is not something that I want to reach for necessarily, but it definitely does sound perfect for the season. And also it does have illustrations in it as well, which I didn't remember until just now flipping through it. So this is actually making me more excited to read it. I love a book with illustrations. Next up, we have a couple of books with sprayed edges. That was not intentional, they're just how I put them on the shelf. But we have The Familiar by Leigh Bardugo. And I do feel like Leigh Bardugo just in general is a good author for the fall season. All of her books have kind of like a darker kind of vibe. The ones that I've read so far, which has only been honestly Ninth House and Hellbent. But this one, I mean, from the cover, it has a very kind of like spooky season type of vibe. I don't know what this one's about, and I kind of want to keep it that way just because Ninth House, I'm gonna be honest, was a little hard for me to get into. I really loved Hellbent, and I did eventually get into the series, obviously, but it did take me a minute, so I kind of want to go into this one more blind, so I'm not like having preconceived notions of like whether or not I'm gonna like it, you know what I mean? The next one that I have is Gothicana by RECS, and this one I've actually heard really good things about. I picked this one up last year, I think, and a few of you had mentioned that it was really good. I just never got around to reading it, but hopefully we do this year. It says, an unusual girl, an enigmatic man, an ancient castle, what could go wrong? And it is about a student having a romance with a professor at this like creepy castle academy. So definitely perfect for spooky season for sure. Second to last little grouping of books that we have are books that I was gifted and I definitely want to try to read this year. The first one is How to Solve Your Own Murder. One of you guys actually got this one for me. This one is quite literally, like the title suggests, about a woman who's trying to solve her murder before it happens. Unfortunately, after reading the synopsis, she does not end up solving the murder, but I think it's her niece that ends up taking over the task of trying to find out who murdered her great aunt. And then next up we have one that specifically I feel like would be really cute, again, to kind of like break up all of the more scary and dark things. This one is The Accidental Medium. The cover of this one, it just like screams October to me, and I just think it looks really, really fun. This one's about an actress that ends up working at a new age shop and discovers that the voices that she hears in her head are actual real life ghosts. And she finds out that she comes from like a long line of mediums. It says, despite an exciting new avenue of life opening up to Tans, darkness isn't far away, and all too soon there's murder in the air. So I'm assuming she uses the fact that she can talk to ghosts as a way to like help solve a murder or something like that. So this one definitely sounds like cute and fun. And now, last but certainly not least, we have just 3 books in general that have been on my shelves since I started this channel, so I really, really need to read them this fall. The first one is Mary by Nat Cassidy, and this one is actually on my TBR. Again, if you watched my TBR jar video, this one is officially on my TBR, so I have to read this freaking book. Next up is Don't Let It In by Brandon Faircloth. And this book, the cover of this one is definitely what kind of like grabbed my attention. I found this kind of just like randomly scrolling through Amazon looking for spooky season books. This is essentially a collection of short stories by the author. And although this is a really like big, tall, thick book, the font in this is absolutely massive. So I don't see this like taking that long to get through. I don't know why I haven't done it already. And then last but not least for this entire video, we have How to Be Eaten by Maria Adelman. In this one, we have a giant wolf on the cover with a Little Red Riding Hood, which was definitely what grabbed my attention. A darkly funny and provocative debut novel that reimagines classic fairy tale characters as modern women in a support group for trauma. So this one definitely doesn't seem like it's gonna be scary necessarily, but I think it's gonna be like a fun play on typically scary things. And with that, those are all of my fall recommendations for this year, slash just like books that are literally on my own personal fall TBR. Feel free to leave any fall recommendations that you guys have in the comments, and stay tuned for our bookshelf makeover that will be coming very soon. And yeah, with that, that is everything that I have for today's video. I hope you guys have had the most amazing of days, and I will hopefully see you in my next one. Bye!